Welcome to Commercial Real Estate Now, live to you from Key West, Florida, as part of the Stark & Stark and Langan Engineering Best Practices event. I'm your host, Carly Iacono. Today, I am so pleased to be joined by a fantastic panel. We have Tony Maris, Pinnacle Development. We have Paul Harris, the president of PH&C Construction. And we have Keith Otis, principal at Langan Engineering. Today's topic is one that is so important to commercial real estate, and that is how development projects actually get done in today's environment. And these three gentlemen are experts in the field, and we're going to take time and talk about the challenges, but not just the challenges, how you're getting through them. So thank you all for joining me today. Before we get started, we're going to give you just a minute to tell our audience a bit about yourself and your firms. Keith?
Thanks, Carly. Keith Otis with Langan Engineering. I've been a principal there. I've been there for over 20 years now, and we are a full-service land development engineering firm with 56 offices across the country.
Paul Harris with PH&C LLC. We are a owner's representation firm, and what we primarily do is we help owners get through capital projects that they really don't have the in-house people and experience to do.
Hi, I'm Tony Maris. I'm president of Pinnacle Real Estate Development, and we are a multi-line real estate development company doing a lot of multifamily rehabs. We've done a lot in Montgomery County. We're about to take 1,700 lots through the county in various sites. So, and also do large lot custom developments for the national home builders.
Amazing amount of experience. If everyone listening did not pick that up, when we hear projects aren't getting built, they're not penciling, they're too difficult, you're proving that's not the case. So very excited to have you all. Let's start with something that we've heard over and over through the last few years, and that is the scarcity of materials, the difficulty with the supply chain, right? We had COVID with its own disruptions, then we had tariffs, and it just seems like the bar keeps moving on materials. What are you seeing as a challenge, and how are you overcoming materials at the start of a project? Anyone can take that feels passionately about it.
I'll take it first. It seems that no matter, COVID had a lot of domestic supply chain production related issues. Then the Chinese tariffs and the European tariffs came in, and it affected things like cabinets and finished goods. And then the Canadian tariffs. And so it just seems like it's one hit after another. The market seems to be equalizing, I think, a little bit, especially in the site work field as we're coming up. Concrete's kind of moderated. I hate the word new normal, but people have gotten used to what the pricing is. So they're starting to account for it. 3 or 4 years have gone by. Rents have started to adjust a little bit. Prices you can charge have adjusted. So it's building in, but it's still not there. Paul?
I would just add to that the nowadays we are seeing a diversification of supply chains, so people in general are more flexible, and so there are more options out there. And so we are seeing that some of the long lead times are coming down, but some critical equipment, HVAC, electrical systems, they still continue to have long lead times than what we've seen typically.
Yeah, so to Paul's point about as far as electrical equipment goes, our firm has a lot of focus on data center development right now, and those lead times are ever increasing, and it's becoming a problem for those developers. So getting ahead of those as best you can is key.
Is there one, or is it metals? Is it lumber? Is it very highly specialized data center components? Like, where are you seeing the most friction, and how do you get around that? Is it pre-ordering? Is it alternate sourcing? Like, what are the solutions as well?
Absolutely. So a lot of times for a lot of my clients, we'll pre-order select items and then give them to the contractor as part of it, rather than waiting for the procurement and the contractor to procure that after the project is designed and built. So a lot of times during the design process, we're working with vendors to order material, far in advance of when we would typically do it in a project.
Some developers out there have actually purchased mass quantities of things like transformers and sat on them and actually sold them to other developers for a markup. So that's another strategy.
It's like a little side hustle, right? If you just have room and money for extra transformers. So, okay, I'll keep that in mind if I need a secondary business. Tony, where are you seeing the biggest cost increases? Like, where's the pressure from materials coming in due to lack of supply, or maybe just inflation?
I mean, inflation's part of it, but lumber prices are still generally up, and then finished goods are just more expensive than we did. We have an apartment project that we've been trying to underwrite pre-pandemic. We estimated construction costs at about 42 to 43 million. Today, that same building is penciling out at 52 to 54 million. It's hard to bring that in, even though rents have increased and wages have increased. So it's just a little bit of everything. It's a death of a thousand cuts sometimes, but I think it is starting to get a little bit better. And I think what's really helping is architects and engineers are looking for alternative materials to spec up front. So your plan set at the start, we're more engaged in not just being carte blanche, really working to make sure we're bringing a plan set in that's buildable. And going back, we're VE in that building, and we think we're going to get the construction costs back into the mid $40 million range. So that's another strategy people are employing.
And to add to that, besides the material point of it, the labor is constantly, there's still a shortage of labor out there, and primarily all the trades. So you are seeing labor pressures as to keep maintaining and keep rate with inflation that we're seeing. So and right now the labor market's tight, and with immigration crackdown and reforms that you're seeing, it's probably going to get worse before it gets better.
So how do you get the attention of the trades, right, if they have scarcity of talent? Is it wages? Is it relationships? Do you have people in-house that you employ at your company? How are you making sure that you have that stability? Because I think that is a problem across the board.
Well, it being flexible with the modern workforce, like you're looking for, being able to offer other things, to being more efficient, using AI and using items like that where we can do more with less. I mean, that's how we're tackling it.
Would you like to jump in on?
Yeah, we see just on the engineering design side, we see a similar challenge to labor. Just the amount of kids out there that are going into engineering is decreasing. So finding talent, and then once getting them in, keeping them happy, that's always a challenge right now. So it's a lot of things to manage, but our firm's been pretty successful at it.
I think one of the things that's changed recently, especially in the Philadelphia metro market and then the suburbs, the unions have now come out with, a lot of the unions have come out with residential rates, which are, the advantage of the union contractors is their training programs and their apprenticeship programs really give you a higher skilled workforce. But by doing residential rates, they're able to bring their rates in line, and they're able to accelerate their time deadlines usually with a little bit of a more robust or a little bit of a better skilled workforce. And I think that's helping. And I think developers and builders are starting to embrace that relationship a little bit more. It's not as adversarial. It was always public works, publicly funded, prevailing wage jobs were all union. Everything else wasn't. And there was this dichotomy. And we're seeing it now that private developers are starting to look to the unions, and they've been a great resource because they have their own training programs. So they're helping fill that void.
I mean, you need the skill. And if they have the skilled workforce, you better find a way to be friends, right? That's what it sounds like. How about modular construction or any advancements that are taking the number of skilled trades that need to be on a project down? Is that a real thing or not yet?
Yeah, we're seeing some of that. We're as many things as you can build offsite in a controlled environment. You can work on multiple shifts as opposed to working on a job site when you're restricted by weather as well as township limits on work hours. If you can prefab stuff and have it delivered to the site, you can better control your environment and you can get more production out of your crews.
Tony's got to jump in on that.
I just think that on a multifamily project or commercial project, you can do it. I still think if you're doing single family homes, especially in the Northeast, there's a stigma that carries around prefab or modular construction. So it's a little hard to overcome.
What about commercial? Is that an option in commercial development in any way?
To a degree, we're seeing like components. You can find components of systems, not entire systems, but components of systems. And a lot of times it's wall systems is something we'll experiment with. And I've seen a lot of the retailers out there, some of the big names out there, trying for prefab wall systems where they can come and deliver the wall system and erect it on site. Really decreases their time on site.
Is that a cost saving too, or is it just time?
It's generally not a cost saving. It's usually, if anything, a little bit more expensive on the material side, but then they make up the money in the speed to delivery and then reducing the risk in the field.
Which saves money at the end of the day. So, yes. Right?
Yeah.
Could be a path forward. Let's shift gears for a minute and talk about one of the biggest bottlenecks from what I've heard, which is zoning and entitlements. Especially all of us are in the Northeast, so I think we have a really special challenge in that department, right, as opposed to maybe some other parts of the country. How are you overcoming just the timeline, right, and the challenges? Why don't you kick us off?
Yeah, sure. Any development you're going to have resistance to. That's typical. But engaging the community, engaging the public early on, that's typically the best way to do it. You're still going to have resistance, but doing that, getting in front of the regulators as soon as possible, those are key. You're still facing timelines. Some of the regulatory agencies just take a long time generally, but identifying those things early so you can get started early, that's really the key.
And to echo what Keith said, I think being proactive, really understanding your ordinance. And one of the things I try to preach to and teach younger developers that ask me for advice, what's the biggest mistake? The rush to put a plan set in to make a delivery date. And now in Pennsylvania, they have a 90-day review. You're better off taking 30 days and cleaning up the tick and tie items that might get you tripped up in a review letter. That 30 days saves you a 90-day review. If anything kills a project, it's time. So you have to manage that. And look, there's going to be people in an audience that are unhappy about anything, no matter what you built. You try to listen to them, try to tell them why you address their fears. You're not going to win them over. The best you may get is them neutral. But look, municipal government, the people who come out are generally the people who come out to complain. I've never been to a municipal meeting where everyone says, boy, board, you did a great job on that.
We're so glad you're here.
Right.
Yeah.
We're so
Please,
glad the
build
developers
more.
here.
Yeah.
I always joke, no one's ever thrown me a parade. So, it's just part of what
Not
the business is. Maybe someday.
I would say also just making sure that you're working in parallel paths. If it's it's a little more risk if you're going to work with each government agency in parallel paths, but can save you a lot of time on a project if you believe that you have a good path to approval eventually. Because a lot of the permits are not that would come in the entitlements. Not all, but a lot are just a when we're going to get the permit, not an if.
I would say also, since Paul's sitting next to me, having a construction manager or general contractor and even a site work contractor on board early in a project to make sure you're doing things in sequence and phasing that actually can be built. We sit behind computers and design things on paper. Paul has to build them. So there's a disconnect when the contractor comes in towards the end of a project, getting the entitlements, as opposed to early on and them seeing it through with you.
And you just said that because he was sitting next to you. If he wasn't, how would you change your answer? No, I'm kidding. No.
That never happens.
It takes a team is really it, right? And you need everyone to be on the same page. And to Tony's point, if you rush to put the plan together and you don't have all these other things tied up, you're just going to slow it down the road. So each piece is crucially important. That's what I'm hearing. Now, are there, and I know the answer is yes, but I'm sure this varies widely by the municipality and the product type that you're building, but how do you try to make the projects more appealing to towns, all right? If you're having to give back, let's say maybe a park, or maybe there's a huge contribution that would go to the school, like how are you viewing your partnership with the township as being a key element, I guess, in a project?
So I start every meeting, and I mean this. I say to a township, my first night with you, I'm your guest. If we decide to move this project forward, we're now partners. And then when we're done, I'm a resident. I'm here. So I have to be a good neighbor to you, right? And I say that, but it's really how the process works. The first night, they don't know anything about you. You have to take the time to educate them and realize there's going to be a stream of misinformation. People are going to be concerned. You can't be dismissive. And then you have to talk to the township about fiscal benefit, what you're bringing, how does this help change, how is it aligned with their vision, their future planning. And sometimes just having that conversation and saying to people in the audience, look, I understand you're upset, let's go outside after this meeting and talk about this, shows the board that you care and also says to the community that you're listening to them. You have to follow through. A lot of developers say it and then don't. We really try to follow through.
And I think that genuine approach is probably why you're able to get very impressive projects approved, right? Because you really are looking at that how can we be partners in this long term and then following through, not just saying it. So I'm sure that's a hugely crucial piece.
It's in addition to what Tony said, it's being prepared for the meetings, bringing the right professionals, knowing ahead of time, having the experience to know what questions are going to come up. You're never going to get every question. There's always curveballs that come up, but just being prepared for every meeting, that's critical.
And also being able to be flexible. Like if there is something out there that's that is an issue that that you can address within with a reasonable adjustment, then try and do that.
Let's move on to a hot topic right now, which is the availability of power. Now, I know you all have depth of experience in data centers, which, those two words, power and data centers, could not be any more closely tied. But it affects all development, right? The availability of power in the grid. So how are you addressing power needs in your various developments, data centers and others? And how are you working with public utilities and the towns to make sure it's not a burden on the community as well?
Well, starting early discussions with the utility companies is critical. They're the ones who ultimately know what they can provide and how they provide it, what the critical issues are in their infrastructure, and being able to have the discussions with them early and give them realistic what your ideas of loads and timings of what you're trying to accomplish. It's going to help with the communication.
And just to add what Paul said, I think service and meter applications is usually where it starts. The earlier you get that in, the earlier their engineering team can tell you. The worst thing you can do is spend a lot of money with a guy like Keith on a plant and find out that the utility needs a 2 or 3 acre substation, and it's right where it's going to land is right in the middle of a critical design feature that you've done. How do you buffer it? How do you do those things? And that's just on the residential and commercial side. The data center side is an entirely different ball of wax. They're just much bigger. The power demands are different. And people have to remember there's 2 parts to the grid. There's distribution, which is what services your house and most of the local businesses, and there's transmission. In smaller developments, you want to try to stay out of the transmission loads because those studies get even longer. Distribution is a little bit easier to work through, but you still have to plan for it. And having a great engineering team, I mean, I use Langan for probably 95% of my work for a reason. They bring a complete design service professional package. We've used Paul as owner's reps on projects, again, to help once we're into the utilities, getting the utilities installed, coordinating, the field work. So that's really important.
Can we just take a minute and dispel one of the common myths that every project you build, or any developer, not just signaling you out, is going to increase my home electric bill, right? Can we just talk about that for a second? Because I think that's such a common misconception that if you build it, the residents are somehow going to be hurt.
Well, I would just say that a lot of projects we do are redevelopments and site reuse and readaptations of site. So a lot of times we're using this infrastructure; it's already there, and so we're just reinventing it, reusing it, and a lot of times upgrading it at a cost that they pass on to the developer.
Cost to the developer, not to the residents, right? Very important distinction.
We did a project in Bridgeport that required the relocation of a power line, and that $1 million cost was borne by us, not by the utility and not by its ratepayers. And there's a misconception, too, that if I build this development today, well, that's going to impact my rate tomorrow. The rate that you're paying today was purchased by your utility company 3 years ago in an auction. So there's this long lead time. And what everyone misses is that the grid today has less demand on it, put aside the data center load, because light bulbs went from incandescent to LED. All your appliances got more efficient. The hair dryers people use, not me, but some people use, are all more efficient today. So the maximum loads most utilities had on a residential commercial base were high in 2014 and have lowered, which is now what's led to this energy, quote unquote, availability crisis. And we do have a transmission problem, and we also have a generation problem in this country that we have to fix both legs of that.
But I would argue that if there's not developers like you trying to build new projects, it's not going to get fixed as quickly. So this is actually a way to bring attention to a power grid that needs to be upgraded or more capability in a certain area. It's more money, right, in a market that often leads to improvements.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and as you see more electrification of not just homes and data centers, but of cars and tools, battery operated and battery support, you're going to see a continuing need for electric increase.
Absolutely. When you're looking at it, Keith, from the engineering side, is there anything from the power side that kind of factors into your plans that you take a look at?
Yeah, a lot of times it's, as Tony mentioned, just where things are going to go. siting those properly, knowing early on how big of a substation you're going to need, transformer pad, what have you. We do a lot of work with utility companies also in upgrades to substations and their distribution system. So having a good knowledge of that early on helps out a lot.
Now let's look at it a little more big picture. We've got hard costs, we have soft costs. I would imagine everything has gone up in the last 5 years, right? Where are you feeling the biggest pinch now in terms of budgeting and pro-forming projects from a cost perspective? Or maybe it's all of it, but.
Well, for me, for a lot of my clients, it just seems like some of the rents have not increased commensurate with what the costs are seeing. So that's kind of where they're getting squeezed. And so, we're looking for ways to be creative, looking for ways to maybe level down the finishes or something like that in order to be able to make some projects pencil. Yeah.
Echoing what Paul said, but you also have cap rates have not compressed enough to help underwrite it. And I think too, depending on where you are in the country, there's a style of building, and we're still pretty much a sticks, lumber-based product. So it's hard to modularize that. It's just all these little variables that you just can't get right under that threshold that you really need to make a deal work. And now if you do bigger commercial projects, warehouses, a lot of those end users are coming back with a straight yield on cost. So you're getting an open book, but your profit potential shrinks. And then you have to look, all right, this is a specialized building. What's the length of that lease? How long are they going to be? How do I underwrite this? And I don't want to be stuck with a specialized building 15 years from now. And especially as robotics and other things come in, building geometries are changing. So there's a lot of different little pieces that I think you just have to be forward looking. And how do I do this? I do think we're going to get there. I think rates will come down a little bit, especially with the new Fed chair. But we'll see. And then I think cap rates will compress a little. We're not going to see what we saw pre-pandemic or during the pandemic. We're just not. We're not getting back to that. But I think people are accepting that and underwriting to it.
That was a very classic landlord comment to make, that rates are coming down and cap rates will compress, and every broker listening is going, oh, okay, there's another one. Unrealistic. No, I think you might be right. Obviously, with the new Fed chair, there's more of a hope for it. So we're all on the same page. That would be great news. Did you want to comment on cost quickly?
Yeah, just from our perspective, obviously we're not in the developer's chair, but just making more efficient design, spending the time going through, making sure that you push the envelope with all the different criteria that we have to design to, saving on things like earthwork, retaining walls, et cetera. That helps drive the cost down. Any advice you would give someone who's starting a project, maybe a newer developer like Tony alluded to at the beginning? What's one piece of advice or one thing that you wish clients knew that you hear over and over as a mistake, or maybe they come to you too late? I'm sure there's a long list here, but let's just pick one piece of advice.
I would say one piece of advice is just getting the whole team input. And during the design phase, really the keys to the world, the guys who need support, they need from anybody else, if they're not, or even from internally his own team, they need to have the full picture of the project so they can really understand all the different variables out there, and having a good understanding that, and then soliciting input from people outside that realm for contractors on pricing and means and methods, and integrating that all up front. So when a project is ready for bid, that we know that you're going to get the best number back. That's critical.
So good data in produces cleaner and more accurate bids out, right? Makes sense.
And I would always say that I would always lean towards spending a little bit more money on the design side, so that to eliminate a lot of surprises and risks on the in the construction side, because that's when costs really add up. It's easy to change it on a piece of paper. It's harder to change it when it's a 3-story building.
Yeah, on the same lines as Paul was just explaining, not really skimping in the beginning of a project in the due diligence and feasibility. Do everything that you need to do to get a clear picture from wetlands, floodplains, natural resources, cultural, historical, all those issues. If you don't know about those until later, it could add another year onto a project.
And you get what you pay for. So if you skimp, you wind up the risk of surprises. I become a big advocate of soft digs for all my anything I have to do to tie into existing infrastructure. There's a survey, there's a map, there's a plan. We'll spend $100,000 on soft digs, because you'd be surprised how much it's off. Or especially in older places, redevelopment projects, there's a lot of old infrastructure. And if you're not careful, you could wind up with some big surprises. And even though I know the lesson, I mean, we spent $100,000 on soft digs, and we should have spent another $100,000 on a project. And then having design professionals that really help you. The cheapest bid sometimes isn't the best product out at the end of the day. And then scale your professional to the size of your project. If you have a 3-lot subdivision, there's somebody else that can do that. If you have a 300-lot subdivision, there's somebody else that can do that. Pick your professionals accordingly.
Cheapest bid is not always the cheapest at the end of the day, right?
Never is.
Yeah, almost never.
Right.
Almost never.
Matters at the end of the project, not the beginning.
Yeah, exactly. So I want to end on a positive note. So I'd like each of you to tell us one thing that you're bullish on or excited about for 2026. Where do you see opportunity, or where do you see a bright spot in your particular business line? And I didn't tell you this in advance. So if you need a minute, I could sing like a Jeopardy song or something. We'll just give you a second here, but jump in whenever you're ready.
Yeah, I'll go first. For me, just the amount of data center work right now, particularly, we're doing a lot of it. But I would say if I get a shot at two things, industrial distribution warehouse is coming back online too. We're seeing a lot of activity there. Not as much of the larger buildings that you used to see, but smaller infill type of development. There's a lot of that going on, in addition to all the other sectors.
Well, I always say change is good for us because change that equals work, and we see a lot of change still in pretty much every industry, data centers as well as retail, and that is always good for us. So we look forward to change.
I'm going to take a little bit of a different approach. I think the opportunity for people to enter the construction business, not just as a developer or as a landlord, as an owner, but from a skilled trade standpoint. I think this. And I hate to say the word, this myth that you need a college education to be successful. Not that people shouldn't get one, but that we're actually going to start investing in telling young people it's okay to go be a plumber. It's okay to be an electrician. It's a great thing to be a welder. And there are so many jobs and so many opportunities. And then take that skill, go to college, open your own business, and build out that part of the American dream. I think that this year, with all the projects that are starting to come through, there's just a realization that this is an opportunity for this country and for America's youth to have a different opportunity than what was always presented to us as the best path forward. And I think that's really exciting because I think that's what's going to make this country better.
I completely agree with you, but I think there's a lag time. So we've got to get on that, right?
Oh, absolutely.
In your free time, you got to start speaking in the elementary schools. Like get them on board now, because it takes a while for them to get through trade school and go into the workforce. But it's a need now.
Oh, and there's a lot of data though that there are, like down in Virginia, they're starting to put the apprenticeship programs into the high school. So for the trades, so as they're coming out of high school, they're already a year or two into that program. Bucks County is starting a program with the unions in Pennsylvania that are doing that. So there is some forward thinking happening. We're not going to get the 120,000-ish electricians that I heard we need in the next couple of years.
It's a big number.
It's a big number, but if we get half of it, it's better than getting a quarter of it.
Right.
And parents have to be willing to say that it's okay. And boys and girls, these are not. Yeah, that's the other part I think that's really exciting. Is the entry of women into that part of the workforce is really going to be exciting because it opens up a whole different aspect to that part of the business that traditionally wasn't viewed as being there.
I love that. And change as a positive is always nice to hear, because I think a lot of people shy away from change, or they want things to be how they were before. And it's almost panic inducing if things are different, but it is the best window to opportunity. So thanks for bringing that up as well. Any parting thoughts, words of wisdom, or things that you'd like to share before we wrap? I think we nailed it all. Yeah? No, Tony has something. Come on. We know.
I was just going to say, the best part of my job, I mean, two of my best friends are sitting here. I get to go to work every day, and even though they're not in my company, there really is a fraternity that happens with the people. And if you treat people like family and you do it right, this business can be really rewarding and exciting. Look, there's a lot of stress. There's a lot of pressure. Your banks are leaning on you. Your tenants are leaning on you. Your contractors are driving you crazy. But if you approach it right, you can have a lot of fun doing this, and don't get caught up in the minute. Realize the day and the month and the year, and it's a lot better, a lot more fun.
Yeah, it's never boring. I would say that.
I think we all can agree on that. Find the good people, hold them tight, and stay focused. And I think that's really the name of commercial real estate. Do you agree?
Yeah, enjoy what you do.
try to enjoy what you do.
Yeah.
No, good stuff. Well, gentlemen, I think this was a great conversation. Thank you for shedding light on the state of development and from all three of your professions. I really appreciate all of your insights. To everyone listening, that was this episode of Commercial Real Estate Now. We're so happy you tuned in, and we look forward to seeing you again very soon. Have a great day, everyone.